welcome to Gardening at 58 North. So in this video I'd like to introduce you to my new design for my garden here. So what this is that you're looking at the moment is a 3D representation of my garden in its current state. So I've designed the house similar to how mine looks. You might think the house looks very strange with such a large incline on the roof, but that's actually how the house is. We've got a very steep incline on the roof, so it is a bit of a strange looking house. This represents the front garden here. Now the two shrubs aren't the actual shrubs that they are. The problem I've had with this system is there's not quite enough 3D models that represent every single plant in the world, so I don't have all the exact species correct, but the general shapes and sizes are how the plants look in real life. And I did make a really intricate design with loads of 3D models, but what happened is the computer basically crashed. It was too much for it to handle. So the only 3D model I really have is the house and the greenhouse. The rest of these they appear 3D until I rotate. As you can see, they're actually just 2D that rotate to face you at all times. That's just the limitations of my computer and the software. But basically this is the front garden. So this is how it is at the moment. We've got the central path coming down the middle here. We also have a driveway, a couple of hedges. We have this shrub here, which is actually a winter flowering viburnum, and we also have a contorted hazel. So both of these I'll be taking out, and you'll see that in the other design. So if I move to the back of the house here, we should be able to see how the back garden currently looks. So I've got a person here as a representation of scale. I think this person is supposed to be 5.5 foot, something like that. So what we've got here is we've got the greenhouse, so the polytunnel and the greenhouse. I managed to get some actual photos of my polytunnel and insert them. So these are actually my house plants that you can see inside here, and you can probably see my reflection as well in the photo. So in the back here, the only thing I'm missing on this design really is we have several shrubs in this area and this area, and a small bed here. So that will all be removed. But this is pretty much how it is at the moment. It's pretty much a blank canvas. We have there's two large trees. So there's a festiculate apple tree here, which grows up as a column, and then there's a large plum tree at the back as well. But otherwise, we've got a greenhouse, some rather empty beds here, a bare area at the back where originally this house would have had a shed, and it's just kind of like a shrubby area, and just lots of weeds growing in bare soil. There's not any grass, and the rest of it is all lawn. So it's pretty much a blank canvas to do what I want. So I'll go ahead now and I'll open up my front garden design to let you see what that looks like. But before I do that, I'll just give you a quick idea of the aspect of this garden. So I'll rotate this now so we're facing north, and it's a little bit of an odd aspect, and I'll get more of a vertical view for you as well. So if we were to face north, it would be just about this angle. So the house faces east-southeast, so the front garden is very sunny in the morning and sunny for most of the day until the afternoon when the house shades it out. The back garden, it's a lot shadier, especially in winter when the sun's low. You'll see as I tilt this down, the house is such a high, tall house with a high roof line that when the sun comes, it gets deflected quite easily. So during the morning and afternoon, this back garden, it's very little sun, especially with this tall hedge here and these trees. But in the summertime, this actually does get quite a bit of sunlight, so it doesn't get any morning sun, but come midday, it's pretty good, and the afternoon sun's quite good as well. So the only real thing when it comes to shading out the garden is this hedge here. So along this line here, in the front garden, we're going to have a little bit of shadows there, so that's going to be a bit of a dark area. And then the back garden, as I say, anything near here in winter is dark, but during summer that's not an issue, and to be honest, most plants are completely dormant in winter, so that's not a problem. So the main shade area we need to worry about is this strip along here. This hedge is quite tall, it's probably about 2 meters at this point. Up here it goes to about 2.5 meters. It's a bit of a strange shaped hedge. And so there's quite shady along this course, so that's the only real consideration for you to take. Otherwise, it's quite an open site, quite sunny, and so we've got plenty of options when it comes to designing the garden. So this is the rendering that I've come up with for the design of the front garden. Now again, the models, there's a lot of models in here, so it might get a bit stuttery at times in the video, but this is the general idea what I'm going for in the front garden. So I've had to design the front garden separate from the back. I'll show you the back later on, but at the moment I've had to put them in two different designs just because that's all my computer can handle. So this is the front garden, and basically what I'm intending to do is put down a solid concrete path. Currently it's just stepping stones. It didn't so in the previous design, but it's just a stepping stone path, so I need to widen that. The reason being, it's going to be difficult to get any grass around the edges or weed around the edges, and also I'd like a wider path because I quite like the idea of having plants trailing slightly onto the path, and if I have a very narrow path, then I won't be able to walk up and down it. So it needs to be a little bit wider so that my plants can trail into it slightly. And it's a similar thing with the driveway. At the moment, the driveway here is so narrow that when you come out the car, you have to walk on the grass. You can't. There's no other way of getting up and down the driveway. So the idea here is if I can widen the driveway very slightly, which has been done in this design, then that gives enough space to walk up and down here, get into the house this way or that way, and that way I can completely plant this up with plants and not have to worry about where to step when you come out the car. So one of the weird quirks about this front garden is there's a very thin strip here along the driveway, which I will probably keep, to be honest, because it's nice to have something on the border of the garden. So my idea for this is actually to plant it up with flowering bulbs, and these are the actual type of flowering bulbs that I'm going for. So the first one is the tallest one here, which is the allium. I'm going to go for some giant purple alliums. These flower kind of May, June time, but the leaves, they tend to have foliage from about February time right through to June, and then when they flower, the leaves normally die off. So this won't have any foliage from June right through to January, February time. So there'll be no foliage there then, but there'll be nice big flowers probably May, June, maybe even July. The flowers do last a little while. And then the other plants I wanted to put in this border are a type of lily called Nerine Bowdenii, which is a big bulb. When it comes to the height of these nerines are actually going to be about 2 foot tall. These alliums are actually about 3 foot tall, so they are quite big. It's hard to kind of show that scale in this model, but basically these are about 1 meter in height or 3 foot, and these are about 60 centimeters or 2 foot in height. And the nerines are really good when it comes to late summer flowers. So these will just be leaves from probably April, May time through to about September, August time. So these will be having their leaves in the summer. The alliums will have their leaves in the winter, or late winter, early spring. So the idea is these shouldn't compete with each other too much. They might compete a bit for root space because they're both bulbs, but the nerines tend to be on the surface, whereas the alliums tend to be underground. So these shouldn't compete too much, and certainly with the foliage they won't compete. And when it comes to flowering, it's very different flowering times. So the nerines, they're actually the latest flowers normally in this part of Scotland. They tend to flower in October time, sometimes into November, and they're really bright pink, and they just give this really great display. So I'm really looking forward to having that as a late bit of colour, a bit of interest in the garden, basically. So this is a mixed border. It's an idea I've had for a couple of years, combining these plants. I've never combined them in a garden before, but I think they should do quite well. And I'll see how they do. If there's any space in between, I might see if there's anything I can put here in summer, because during summer it's just going to be leaves, and during winter it's probably not going to be much apart from maybe some alliums coming up. So there's always scope to add something else in here to prolong the season, but I think these two should be quite good partnering. And then when it comes to the rest of the garden, the main feature is probably the two laburnums here. So this isn't what the laburnums will look like because I'm hoping to heavily train them. So I'm going to go for the two laburnums. Laburnums are a fast growing tree, but once they get to their full height they kind of stop growing. So they grow up to probably 4 or 5 meters tall, and then they just stop growing. So they're a small tree, but they can quickly get to that size. So that will give me quick instant impact in the garden. And of course in spring they're absolutely covered in these yellow flowers which hang right down and look really nice, giving a really good display. So I'll need to plant these this winter because I want to get the trees in the first year. The reason I want to get the trees in early is because they need time to grow and get to their full size. But fortunately the laburnums do grow quite fast. But my idea is to grow them up into an archway. There's several nice, if you look online, there's several nice photos of other people who have made laburnum archways, and they do look really nice. I'm not going to make a laburnum tunnel because I don't want to shade out the whole garden, but I'm just going to make a very well, neatly trained archway. I might, if I'm feeling adventurous and we've got enough years in this house to grow it right over the driveway, I might also grow it right over the driveway with this one, and just create kind of an interesting archway with the laburnums there. And so the other shrubs that I'm going for is this one here. This isn't actually what it looks like. I couldn't get a model for it. As I say, the models online, they don't have all the species in the world. So this is an Abutilon, and it's going to be a bit risky trying to grow this one in this part of Scotland, but I'd like a bit of a challenge to see if it will grow. So this is an Abutilon Suntense. This has got really nice blue flowers. It should be hardy in this part of Scotland, but it's going to be a bit touch and go. I reckon it should be okay, but if there's a hard winter, it might get severely damaged. So it's about -10, it can probably handle. And it gives blue flowers, but the blue flowers, they last all summer long. They start in spring, go right through to autumn. So it's a very long flowering shrub. It's a bit of a cross between a shrub and a tree. So I'm going to try and grow it more of a tree as a tree. So I'm going to keep the base clear, remove any low branches so I can plant underneath it, and just grow it into a small tree. So probably only 3 or 4 meters at most, but that should look quite nice in that position. So looking at the main feature of the garden, which will probably be the beds, I'm looking at a very traditional British front garden design. So similar to what people used to grow in the 1950s, 1960s in the UK. It's kind of gone out of fashion now, but you still see a few of them around in gardens. More it tends to be people who are retired who tend to grow plants like this nowadays, as it is a lot of work and a lot of maintenance. But my idea is to have 2 rose beds. I'm going to mainly plant out with red and yellow roses. They tend to be my favourite colour of roses. I'm going to go for Arthur Bell for at least some of the yellow ones, and because it's got a great scent. It's Floribunda rose, so it flowers the whole summer long, gives really good long flowering season right into autumn. It's got really nice fragrance, and it tends to be really disease resistant as well. And it keeps it's a good sized shrub as well. It doesn't get too big, but it's not really weak rose either. And the other one, I'm going to go for some red roses. At least some of those varieties are going to be a variety called Deep Secret. It's this really, really deep red rose. When the buds first come out, the roses are black. But as soon as the buds start to thicken up and the flower opens, it goes to this really, really dark red. One of the darkest red roses that I know. But also this one is pretty good disease resistance. A slightly larger shrub than the Arthur Bell. But the fragrance is one of the best that I've smelled on a rose, so I'm definitely going for a Deep Secret rose. And I'm going to have a look at some other rose varieties, but generally it's going to be red and yellow roses, definitely Arthur Bell and definitely Deep Secret. And then underneath that I'm going to plant it up with loads of spring bulbs. That will probably be next autumn. I'll be planting that up. So over winter time it's going to be full of flowers, full of spring bulbs. They're going to have to be early flowering bulbs though, because I want the foliage to die down in time for me to plant the summer bedding plants. So I'll probably have winter bedding as well. Not too many winter bedding plants, but just a few, and a lot of spring bulbs. So the winter bedding, they will give colour from probably October, November time through to January, and then the spring bulbs will really come into their own and keep going till probably March or April time. I'm going for the very early bulbs, probably things like crocuses, snowdrops, because if I went for daffodils or tulips, although they would give me a longer flowering season, they'd go right through to April or May. The problem with tulips and daffodils, if you're going to mix them with any other plants, is the leaves, especially in this part of Scotland where it's quite cool summers, they stay right through to July, so there wouldn't be any space for any other plants. So I need those other ones that will die down nice and quickly, those nice early spring flowering bulbs. So in the bed itself, on the bottom, once the bulbs have died down, it's going to be seasonal bedding. I've just put canna lilies and geraniums on this design, but that's not necessarily what I'm going to grow. And the colour as well, I don't think I'll go completely red. I'll just go for a multitude of colours. But definitely it's going to be seasonal bedding, and this is just to give you, as I say, a representation. I don't know what bedding plants I'll go for, but it'll be seasonal bedding, summer bedding throughout the summer. It'll probably change every year, just to see what's available and see what takes my fancy as the year goes by. But it'll be very formal, and it'll be just kind of regimented beds like that. And so coming over here, we're just going to have a thin strip of lawn in this design. I haven't fully decided if I want to keep the lawn. If I do keep this, this will be the only lawn in the whole garden. So if I get rid of it, then I won't have any lawn. And I would like to make some videos about how to look after lawns and things. So I'm definitely keeping the lawn for now, but that might change in the future. I'm not sure, especially if this hedge makes it rather shady. So at the end of this this section here, I'm going to have a cordyline. This is kind of a hint to what the back garden will look like. So the front garden will look really pretty normal, quite traditional, maybe a bit more showy and a bit more colourful than the average garden, but nothing completely crazy. It's going to be quite a normal looking garden, and I'm just going to have this cordyline as a slight hint to what's going on in the back garden. So Cordylines aren't that strange to see in gardens around here, especially more towards the coast where it's sheltered from the hardest frost. These will be fine most winters, about -15, -10 until they get killed to the ground. They could get a bit of frost damage on the leaves at -5, but a bit of frost damage every year isn't a big problem. So this will grow well, but I will have to give it protection and wrap it up with some kind of fleece in the very coldest winters. So this should survive for several years, and maybe every 5 years or so, there's a chance it could get damaged. But that should grow quite well. As I say, it's quite common in front gardens, so it doesn't look too strange, but it will grow into a nice palm tree, and it will just give a hint of what the back garden will look like. So going closer to the house, we have this kind of semicircular bed, which I've dug out this year. This, I'm not sure what I'm going to put in here. It's going to be tall seasonal plants probably. As an example, I've just put foxgloves in for now, but it's probably just going to be tall plant, maybe hollyhocks. I'm not sure if I'm going to go for perennials or annuals. But something like gladioli or hollyhock, something tall and long flowering season as well, just to give a bit of colour to the front of the house, and also just to give a little bit of privacy. I want something about probably a metre and a half in height, just to give some privacy to the house. But either side of this semicircular bed, I'm going to be growing giant sunflowers. So these will probably change each year. I'll try different varieties each year, but I really like growing sunflowers, and I wanted to have some space for them. So right next to the wall of the house here, it means I can keep them a bit more sheltered, and they should be able to get their full height without being blown over by the wind. So my idea for the front of the house here is I'm going to have a green wall. I won't be able to attach it to the house because I've got external insulation on the house and I don't want to damage that. But I'm going to set up some kind of system with the green wall. That will probably have bedding plants in it, so it'll be really colourful. It's green on the design, but in real life it's going to be absolutely full of colours. I've also got two pots which are actually cast into the concrete slab here, so I can't remove them, so they'll be still there. This one on the right has a rose at the moment. Probably can't take that out, so it'll probably be a rose again. The one on the left, all it has at the moment is tulips, so I'll probably plant that up with something else, and that'll be seasonal flowers. I'll also put several other pots in this concrete area. Fill up this whole concrete area with pots full of bedding plants. This will be a bit like when I used to have my balcony in Edinburgh. This will be covered in bedding plants in pots. Also a bit like my old balcony, where it's a small space but absolutely full of flowers. And I'll probably also try and get some kind of planter fixed up onto the windowsill here. It's quite a deep windowsill because of the external insulation on the house. As you can probably see on the doorway here, there's been an extra 20-30 centimeters added to the outside of the house. So the windowsills are very deep, so I can put a nice big planter here, and that'll give some really nice seasonal interest. I might plant up with spring bulbs in spring, and then summer trading plants in summer, but we'll see how that does. But that's generally the idea for the front garden. It's going to be quite a traditional looking old-fashioned flower garden, like with rose beds and bedding plants. So this is now looking at the back garden and with the final design, which I'll probably come along with. So this, as I say, there's a lot of 3D models on this side as well. So whenever I move the scene, you'll see the logo blank and look a bit strange. And you've got a few things like this giant dahlia here, which I'll explain later as to why that doesn't look quite right. But I'll go through each plant and give you first of all give you a general idea of the overall design, and then go through individual plants that I'd like to put in here. But there'll be lots more other plants that I'll probably put in over time. These are just some plants that I really like to put in, and then over time I'll put in some other ones just as the design matures, because it's going to be difficult to fully design something and plant it all up in one go. I need time for the plants to grow. I also need to see how much space it takes up. And when you're actually putting it in the ground in person, you get kind of different feeling. And you normally, when you comes up with garden design, you come up with a general idea that's quite specific, but then when you start implementing it, you tend to do little tweaks and changes, just move plants around slightly, because when you're actually in the garden itself, things do look slightly different to do in the 3D model. So in the back garden, I'll definitely be keeping the greenhouse. That'll be getting renovated soon. I need to get some new panes of glass for that. The main new feature in the garden will be this studio shed here. Basically, the house I have at the moment, there's absolutely no storage for any tools or any garden tools like that, and I don't really have a space to film in either, apart from the conservatory. But the conservatory that's full of plants, that's quite difficult to film in there, and it's also incredibly echoey, so the sound isn't very good, and the lighting is not good either, unless it's during the day. So I'll be building a large shed come studio that'll store my tools, also give a filming space, but I don't really want to lose any more growing space in the garden. But at the same time, I do need to build a shed for all my storage. So my idea is actually to build a green shed. So what I'll be doing with this is the front section here, I'll be covering that in climbers, and basically the shed will be clad in wood on this side here and also on this side. The other two sides, they'll be clad in metal because it keeps the cost down. To clad this all in weatherproof timber cladding would be extremely expensive. So the other two sides will be clad in metal sheeting because they'll be out of sight behind hedges, so they won't be really visible. But these two sides I'm going to clad in wood, and then I'm going to have plants growing up them, so various climbers. I haven't fully decided which climbers yet, but I want to give it a kind of a tropical look. So probably something like passion flower, maybe wisteria and clematis, things like that. This side will be very sunny, so this will be good for the more tropical plants, possibly campsis as well. I'm not sure if campsis will grow here. It's a really nice looking flower. I've seen it growing in Edinburgh quite well. I've also seen it in Portugal, but I'm not sure if it'll grow this far north. But campsis is definitely something I'd like to try because it is quite a tropical looking climber. This side here is more shady, so this is more maybe for clematis and things like that. But the idea to get more growing space is I'm actually going to make a green roof on top of this. I don't want it just being a normal roof. That adds a lot of cost to the build and time as well. I need to put in much stronger timbers, much stronger roof frame as well, because when the soil gets wet it's going to be several tons. So it'll be quite a sturdy shed. It'll also help with the sound insulation as well, having it covered in plants and having a green roof. And sound insulation will be quite important if I'm going to be filming in there. So I've not decided what plant I'm going to have on the green roof. I'm tempted by chives because I've seen the green roof with chives before and it looks really nice. I'm also tempted by armeria as well because armeria is a coastal plant here in Scotland. I'll show you some photos now. It's a really stunning looking plant. It tends to grow in really shallow soils and coastal locations, so it's well suited to a roof, so that's another option for it. But the general theme for this garden anyway is a jungle theme. If I can pan this down without it crashing, I can give you more of an in the garden kind of feel to it, so what it might look like. So it's going to be quite an enclosed garden, loads of big jungle foliage plants. So this is a person for scale, so you should feel quite secluded in here. So I'll have a talk now about the landscaping features that will be changing, because it was originally just pretty much all grass. So this section here, originally there was one path coming up here and we had a very thin bed, but it's a bit thin to really plant much in. So my idea is to move the slabs from here to over here. That still gives me access to the greenhouse, and it gives me a much bigger growing space here. The other thing was there was a lot of slabs that came out to about here. So there's a big patio in this area, but this is a great growing area, and it's a bit of a strange place to sit out as it's in the middle of the garden and it's right next to the greenhouse. So I'm getting rid of most of the slabs from here and just having these thin walkway around the edge here of slabs. Those slabs are probably going to be used as foundation for the studio shed, and then at some point, probably not this year, it depends on the budget because paving normally costs quite a bit, but I'll be putting in a new patio in this section. That gives me a little bit of a seating space. I can put my clothes dryer where this lady's standing at the moment, and maybe a little barbecue as well, tucked out the site out around the corner. So this patio will give a nice views into the garden. It's going to be very well secluded because we've got the hedge here. We're going to have kind of jungle style plants on this other side down here, and we're going to have probably a bench and several pots. I might have things like Brugmansia. So this large pot here is probably going to be a Brugmansia. I'll show you a quick picture of me with a Brugmansia that I saw in Germany. A really lovely plant, big trumpet flowers, but definitely subtropical. Wouldn't be able to grow outside in Scotland. So the idea is I grow it in a pot outside and then I take it in winter. So coming into the middle of the garden, what I needed to do is I wanted to plant up the whole thing with plants, but I still need access to the beds and a way of walking around the garden. So what I've decided to do is probably kind of a cross shape with the paths, but just not a true cross, probably staggered like this section here. That splits up into several beds and also gives me access so I can get around the garden and maintain the plants as I need to. So when it comes to the plants, I've got a few here which aren't the exact right 3D models, but they look kind of similar. So this here is supposed to be a Tetrapanax. It probably looks more like a Fatsia japonica. I might put a Fatsia japonica in. They have these lovely big kind of palmate leaves, such as this, and they grow really big. leaves. They're fully hardy in Scotland, so there's no problem with frost. Even in a very hard winter, these will be completely hardy, and they grow about 2 or 3 meters in height as well. So they'll look nice. So I might put Fatsia in, but this is supposed to be a Tetrapanax. Tetrapanax are even bigger leaves, even bigger plant, but the frost often kills them. So this might be herbaceous in my garden. The frost might kill it down to the ground each year, but I'm hoping if it's a mild winter, the stem will stay up and it'll grow into more of a tree. Coming along, I'll probably put an acanthus in here, probably an acanthus mollis. These have great big glossy leaves. This one is actually an acanthus. You can see nice big low glossy leaves, and they also have this really unusual looking big flower spike that remains for quite a long time. So this probably comes up in July, August, and lasts right through to November. So it's a long flowering plant, great foliage looking. And next to that, I'll probably put an unusual lily. This one is called Cardiocrinum giganteum. This grows really, really tall, probably up to 4 meters sometimes. I first saw this in the Botanic Gardens in Edinburgh when I was studying there, and they look truly amazing. They have big leaves, a bit like the hosta actually, this kind of like spade-shaped leaves, and they grow like that for about 3 or 4 years, maybe 5 years, just as leaves, deciduous every winter though. And they just fatten up the bulbs for about 5 years, and then when the bulb's big enough, they shoot up, and they have all these massive giant trumpet flowers growing up to 3 or 4 meters in height of the plant. And then the main plant dies, but then you have all these little young plants come up from underneath. It starts the cycle again, bulbs fatten up, and then it flowers again. So this won't be flowering every year, but when it does, it'll look absolutely stunning. And then dotted around the garden in several places, I'll put lots of hellebores, they're also known as Christmas roses. These will be really good because this is a tropical garden. A lot of these plants will die down in the winter because of the frosts. So the garden will look quite bare in winter. But my plan is, because a lot of these plants are tropical, they're not going to start growing until May time. And so I've got all that time when there's lots of sun coming into the garden, when it's not shaded out by all these tropical foliage plants, that I can grow lots of spring flowers. So it's going to be a bit similar to the front beds in that respect. I'm going to fill it with loads of really early spring bulbs, such as crocuses, and that will give me some winter interest over winter. But I wanted a bit of something right at the beginning of the year, so I've gone for hellebores. They're great because they can grow in really dark, shady locations. So anywhere that's really dark, nothing else will grow, I can put a hellebore in there and it would grow well. They also have really nice leaves. If I go for the correct variety anyway, they have these really lovely big leathery leaves that also look quite tropical. So even though these are extremely hardy, and these can take us even the coldest winters that we might get, the leaves still look nice and tropical. And then in winter, when nothing else is flowering, these will come up January, February time, and give a nice display of flowers. So I'm going to put lots of hellebores in, just kind of dot around in the darkest areas. So another plant I'd like to grow in this border, even though it's not a tropical plant, is the Meconopsis. So Meconopsis poppies, they look similar to this. This isn't a render of an actual Meconopsis poppy, but I'll put up a photo now. They're absolutely stunning blue colour. They're quite sought after plants in the UK because they're quite difficult to grow and people struggle with them, so they're seen as like a challenge. Here in Scotland though, they're actually really easy to grow normally. As long as you have somewhere with dappled shade, the soil's constantly damp and it's acidic soil, they'll do really well. So I've seen them in lots of Scottish gardens where the climate's a bit cooler and they're in a damp position, and they grow pretty much fine without any kind of major need for watering or any maintenance or anything like that. So if I can give it the right conditions, it will grow well here. If you live in a warmer climate where you have hot summers or dry summers, they're not going to do well, or if you have alkaline soils. So in England, for example, these plants don't do too well. But I reckon a Meconopsis should look quite nice in this border. It's dappled shade. As long as I keep it watered, it should be fine. It will be a bit dry in this border with this hedge, but I'm going to keep it well watered. I should be able to grow a Meconopsis quite well in this border here. So coming around to the back area here, I'm going to be putting in a composting area down here so I can deal with all my green waste and compost and put that goodness back into the garden. This is why the path loops around in this section. So I'll probably have an Acer. I really like Japanese acers. They don't really fit so much in with the jungle theme, so I'm just going to have the one. I'm probably going to go for the Acer called Orange Dream. It's one I've had in the past. This will be Acer Palmatum Orange Dream, and it's got really nice foliage. And the foliage changes almost constantly throughout the year. So in spring, when it comes out, it looks quite like a light kind of yellowy colour. Then it goes kind of orange colour, it turns green, and then when it comes to autumn, it turns, I think it's bright red for Orange Dream, but it's basically the colour of the leaves keep changing throughout the summer, and then you get the great autumn colours as well. So that will be probably going here, and also in winter the stems are quite brightly coloured, so that should look nice in that corner. I might try and get a tree fern. Tree ferns are very expensive now in the UK, so I'll see what I can get. I'll probably not be able to get one much of a trunk, it'll probably just be a very short one. And also it's a little bit cold here in this part of Scotland for a tree fern. The leaves will definitely die off every year, but I should be able to keep the trunk alive. So that's an option, but I'm not sure if I'll be able to get away with the tree fern. I'll probably have several hostas as well. My only worry with these hostas is the slugs, so I'm going to try and get some slug resistant ones, try and get some of the ones with the biggest leaves as well, because they're going to look the most impressive. And we'll see how they do. If they do well, I'm going to have lots of hostas because I quite like them. They have nice flowers, lots of interesting foliage, and they can do well in a shady area, so I can underplant them beneath other taller plants. And but yeah, as I say, it depends how much the slugs and snails decide to destroy them. I might have to give up on hostas. And over here, this plant with the red flowers, this is an imperial fritillary, so Fritillaria imperialis. These come in orange, orangey red or yellow. These are really nice tropical looking plants, but they're actually fully hardy. These are early flowering, so probably May, June time. They're a large bulb and get all these leaves at the bottom. They kind of come up and form in early spring, probably about March, April time. And then you get these flower shoots coming up with a cluster of flowers at the top. And these will die down after flowering, so come June time these will be finished. But early May to early June, you'll probably have a lovely display of flowers. So I'll probably definitely go for that plant. So this plant down here is something called Actaea simplex. It's quite a nicely fragranted plant. It's not truly a tropical plant, so it doesn't quite fit in so much with a tropical theme. Also, this plant as well on the right won't fit in so much with a tropical theme. But they're just plants that I really like, and I'd like to try and fit them somewhere into my design. So this will be an Actaea, as I say. Lovely big white creamy flowers late in the year, so this gives very good late colour, and great for butterflies as well. And also has a nice fragrance. And next to it here we've got a Japanese anemone. I just really like them. They can grow underneath other plants, so they don't mind the shade at all. But then come autumn time, they've got these really tall flower spikes, probably about a metre in height, and give you some late flowering from August right through to October. And they look quite nice. Lots of different varieties as well. So I'll definitely putting in some Japanese anemones. I do have to watch though, because these can be a little bit invasive and spread quite a lot, but I don't mind them spreading a bit. They all look quite nice in the garden, I think. There's a couple of other non-tropical plants really, such as this verbena here. This will be a Verbena bonariensis. So it's kind of Mediterranean climate, so it doesn't quite match in with the jungle theme. What I'll do, because when it comes to the planting and the trying to get the most of the daylight, what's probably going to happen is I don't want to shade out the greenhouse here. So I don't want anything too tall in this kind of section of the garden. So these back two beds will probably be big jungle type plants, whereas this front corner and strip down here is going to be more Mediterranean style plants that are lower down, less likely to shade out things, but also plants that need the most sun, because this will be a very sunny spot as it's far enough away from the hedge and these large jungle plants that will get full sun. So that will be a good place for more Mediterranean style planting. And I think Mediterranean style planting will look nice next to a patio as well, as it will look a bit more formal. So that's where the Verbena bonariensis comes in. It grows as just like a small rosette of leaves for most of the summer, but then in autumn it really comes into its own. It sends up these large flower shoots. Most of the shoots are bare, but just at the top you get this really bright purple, kind of violet colour. And they're really good because they don't shade anything, because the stems are so sparse and there's no real leaves, or not many leaves anyway on the stems. They don't shade much, so you get the height without the shade, and they're very late flowering as well, so they'll give some colour right at the end of the year. So that will probably be September, October time for them, but that will just give a really nice floss of colour right at the end of the season. So the other more kind of Mediterranean plants that I'd like to grow will be the Agapanthus here. I need to pick the species quite carefully, because I need to get a really quite hardy one if it's going to be outside the whole summer, and I need to have one that's more suited to my cooler summers. But this should flower for a long period of time if it's in a sunny enough place. Normally in Scotland it tends to flower more August, September, but if I can get it warm enough, and make sure the ground is nice and free draining with some grit. I should be able to get this flowering from July right through to maybe the frosts. So Agapanthus I think will look quite nice. Also the leaves are kind of tropical looking with the big strappy leaves. This here, this isn't going to be an aloe, but this is just what the 3D design is, the closest I could find. This would be a Kniphofia, so also known as a red hot poker. These look really tropical, extremely hardy though. These come from South Africa, but they come from the more mountainous areas of South Africa. So these just have a nice rosette of leaves, and they look the leaves don't look too much like an aloe vera, but they do have a similar shape. But it's the flowers that look a lot like aloe flowers. So it looks really tropical when it's in flower, even though it is a fully hardy plant. And the other plant here I'd like to put in is a Hemerocallis, also known as a daylily. Hemerocallis, they flower nearly constantly through the summer. If you get the right variety, you can get repeat flowering ones that do flower most of the summer. The flowers only last for one day, but because they keep producing so many flowers, it does give quite a good display. And the leaves, if I get the right variety, they can have quite big strappy leaves, and they can look a bit tropical as well. So they'll be going in there. And then I've got, so this is kind of like hardy, tropical looking plants in this section, but this section on the right will be more actual tropical plants. So what I'll have here is I'll have a palm tree. Hopefully this will be a Trachycarpus, probably a Trachycarpus fortunei. There's a couple of different species of Trachycarpus I can choose from. I'm not sure which will be best, but fortunei is the easiest to get here in Scotland, and it seems to grow fine. So I'll probably go for a fortunei. I think it's also called a Chinese wind palm, but it looks nice. You've got these big true palm leaves. It's only real true palm that grows well in Scotland. The cordyline, I don't know if that's really classed as a true palm. That's the one I'll be having in the front garden. But this is the only real true palm that I know that grows well in Scotland. So this will be Trachycarpus fortunei. It's very slow growing though, that's the only problem. So whether I'll actually ever get one the size of a palm tree is very doubtful. If you tend to pay extortionate prices if you go for one that's more than a couple of foot high. So I'll be buying one that's small, probably just barely any trunk at all, and then hopefully if I can give it the best conditions possible, I might get a small 3 or 4 foot palm tree by the time it comes to moving away from the house. But who knows, maybe one day this will grow into a tall palm tree. I have seen one in Edinburgh, and it was probably about 10 meters tall, but that one was probably over 100 years old, so they're very slow growing. And also in this bed I'd like to try some hardy bananas. Although it's probably far too cold for me to keep the stems of the bananas every year, if I put in loads and loads of mulch on the ground, I should be able to keep the roots alive over winter, and then they'll come up in spring, they'll give me really great foliage, and then by late autumn I should have some slight stem on them as well, so they'll look like a small banana palm tree. And there's several different varieties to go for. I'm not sure which one I'm going to go for, because there's a lot of different bananas species. So I'm probably going to try 2 or 3 different species, see which one is best suited for my climate, and then stick with that. So there's also several bananas that will grow well as annuals in my garden. So there's the Abyssinian banana, and there's also the snow banana. Both of them are very unlikely to survive the winter, even if I mulch the roots. But they give really fast growth, and they have lovely big foliage. So I won't be growing them for the height in the stems, but for the giant leaves. Those ones I'll probably start kind of late summer, autumn time. Grow them over the winter in the conservatory, then put them out in summer. Let them grow for a year, depending how big they are. If they're not too big, I'll dig them out of the garden, cut the leaves off, keep them somewhere frost-free over winter. Try and get them to go next year. If they're too big, I'll probably just leave them outside because they'll be too large to really dig up and try and overwinter. And there's a slight chance if it's a mild winter, they might just make it through as well. So the other large plant I'd like to put in here is a giant dahlia. So it won't look like this, but it will have similar coloured flowers if it does flower. It's a dahlia called Dahlia imperialis. It's a giant dahlia. They can apparently get up to 5 or 7 meters in height. I reckon mine will only get up to 3 or 4 meters. It's a giant dahlia. I'll be growing it for its foliage. It'll have giant leaves. The leaves will look a bit like this, but this is just a normal dahlia. This isn't the giant one, so the leaves will be somewhat different. But they will grow up to probably 3 or 4 meters in height, this plant, and it'll look really nice with the foliage. Just a fast-growing, interesting-looking tree. But it's unlikely to flower because what you need is a subtropical or Mediterranean climate. If this will want to flower probably in November, December time, by then it's too cold and the frost will have come. If it does flower, it'll have nice pink flowers, but I'll probably just be growing this as more of a curiosity plant, and also just to have the nice foliage as well. There's one more plant I'd like to put in this garden, but I've not actually put it on the 3D design. I'll probably go in this bed, and that's the princess tree, or also known as Paulownia. I'm going to try and get my hands on a hybrid one. There's several companies now breeding them to make them even faster growing, even though they're one of the fastest growing trees in the world anyway. I'm going to try and get a variety called Pao Tong, which is supposed to be the fastest growing for my climate, and that should be able to grow about 4 meters in 1 year if it's in the correct conditions. And when you pollard them, they grow even faster, so I could even get 4 or 5 meters growth in 1 year. They have massive leaves the size of dustbin lids, and if I don't cut it down every year, they'll have smaller leaves, but they'll have nice flowers in spring. So what I might do is let it grow for a few years, enjoy the flowers, and then cut it down to the ground and enjoy the giant leaves for the next year. So that'll hopefully go in this bed somewhere. And then underneath this bed, I'm going to put some more shade tolerant plants, but also keep it very tropical. So I'm going to put some cannas in here, and I'm also going to put some hardy gingers as well, and ginger lilies. So there's going to be a variety of them, different heights. Put the tallest ones at the back, shortest at the front. This is generally what the gingers will look like, this plant on the right. The cannas will generally look like this one on the left. I can get some giant cannas that should grow a little bit like a banana tree, up to about 2 meters or so. And then I'll have some smaller cannas that will only grow about 1 foot tall. They'll give some nice flowers, and I know they should be able to flower in here in Scotland. When it comes to the hardy gingers though, they'll give me some great foliage, but I'm not sure if I'm going to get any flowers here in Scotland. But it's worth a try, I think. If we have a mild autumn or a hot summer, we might get some flowers from the gingers, but I'll probably more just grow them for foliage. And the cannas and the gingers, because we don't get really hard frost here because I'm close enough to the sea, unless it's a really cold winter, I should be able to just put a really thick layer of mulch, and most of these should survive. When it comes to the cannas, it depends on the variety. Some of them I'll probably need to dig up and overwinter just as roots inside. But I'm hoping most of these can stay outside. Just a really thick mulch. I'll probably put lots of straw down, possibly some plastic as well, or something to keep the worst of the rain off so it doesn't get too wet. And if I keep it well mulched, hopefully these will survive the whole winter without too much protection. So the final plants to look at in the garden are going to be the backdrop here. So what I'm going to have is I'm going to still keep the plum tree, and I'm going to keep the apple because it's right at the back and it's very narrow. So these will grow up and grow tall. But we've got this strange little corner that I've got down here. So I'm not sure what I'm going to plant in yet, so I've left that empty on the design. But the idea is I'm going to have 2 or 3 different types of bamboo. So at the back here, I'm only going to have a Phyllostachys aurea, which is a bamboo that grows maybe 4 to 6 meters here in Scotland. And it has lovely yellow stems. It's quite bushy as well. I've seen it grow really well in Scotland, especially in Edinburgh, so I know this is hardy here and it will grow well. This will give a nice kind of screen at the back and block off the back of the garden and give some shelter. So I think that will look quite nice there. And then on the right, I'm going to grow either Phyllostachys edulis or Phyllostachys vivax. I've got the edulis growing from seed, so if that's hardy enough, I'll try and grow that. But I know it can take the hard frost in winter, but it can't take the cool summer temperatures, so that might not ever grow that tall. But these are giant bamboos. The Phyllostachys vivax and the edulis, both of them can grow up to 30 meters in height. Realistically, in Scotland, 10 meters is probably the absolute maximum, but I'm not likely to even get that in my garden, or at least not within the next 10 years. They probably take several years to get that size. But I'll be putting them in this corner just out of interest. See if I can grow giant bamboo here in Scotland. They won't give a great amount of screening because the bottom stems are normally quite bare, so they won't screen off a lot, but they'll give a lot of shelter from the wind. This is the north side of the garden. This will stop against some of the northerly winds. And it will be quite important to create a microclimate here in the garden. When growing tropical plants, a lot of them are going to have giant leaves, so I need to make sure I keep the wind out as much as possible, especially the banana trees, because they'll get buffeted by the winds and they'll get shredded. So you can see, for example, on this rendering of a banana here, you've got all these rips in the leaves. The leaves are going to be very ripped if I'm not careful. They should look like this, just continuous, but it's quite likely they get lots of rips from the wind. So I really need to keep the wind out, and that will also keep the plants a bit warmer. because when the sun shines on the leaves of the plants, it warms them up, but if there's a wind, it will then quickly cool them down. So if I can get a nice microclimate, get the humidity up, keep the wind out, that will really help me grow some tropical plants. So that's why I'm keeping the hedge, getting some taller, more sheltered bits at the back, and also the studio shed will help with that also. And when it comes to the bamboo, I will need to put some kind of root liner in, bamboo protection liner, because these are spreading varieties of bamboo, and I don't want them spreading into my neighbour's garden or spreading onto my shed or greenhouse and causing problems in the future. So I'll definitely be putting something in there to stop the roots. That's generally the design for the back garden. So now I need to go ahead and start making it. As I say, I'll try and get the trees and larger plants in first because they take a while to grow. And I won't be planting up the entire garden in 1 year, because that would either be a huge amount of work growing it all from seed, or it would cost probably thousands of pounds in plants, because a lot of these tropical plants aren't that cheap and they're not that easy to get. In Scotland you have to go to more specialist nurseries or online ordering. So what I'll probably do is I'll probably grow a lot of annuals in the first year. I'll plant some of the plants that need the time to get large, such as the bananas and maybe the bamboos. Plant them in the first year. And these other sections of the garden I'll just put up with annuals, maybe some sunflowers, something that looks a bit tropical but just grows in 1 year, and I can get that instant impact. So I'll probably go for something like the castor oil plant, as a castor oil plant can grow really fast from seed in 1 year and just give a nice amount of foliage and cover. So that's about it for this video. It's probably quite a long one. Hopefully you've managed to get through the whole video. And as I say, I'll need to start designing some of this soon, and probably start with the shed and things. Some things like the patio here and some of the other planting will probably have to wait till next year, but I'll hopefully get most of this planted up in its first year, even with annuals, if I can.